So today I'm going to show you how to replace the elastic if you've got a pair of trousers or shorts where the elastic just isn't as stretchy as you need it to be. So this here is an old pair of pyjama trousers I have. There is a little bit of stretch left in the elastic, but when I wear these, they end up falling down. So I'm going to swap it out for some new elastic. And what you need to do this is you need a pair of scissors, a seam ripper, you need some replacement elastic, which needs to be the same width as the elastic that you're going to take out. This is also softer waistband elastic, so it's just softer to wear than sort of your normal elastic, so that makes it a bit more comfortable. And then I've also got some pins, and I'm going to be using my sewing machine with some matching thread, which I've already threaded up. So the very first thing to do is to take a look at how your garment is constructed. So for this example here, I've got just one seam that is stitched around the waistband, and everything else is one continuous strip. So this is most likely to be where the elastic is joined. So what I'm going to do is undo a little bit of the stitching just where this waistband is attached to the main trouser. And from what I can see on this side, it's actually 2 rows of stitching. So there's one row at the bottom and then there's one just a little bit further up. So I'm going to undo both of those, probably quite a short space, just this, so I can again see what's going on and see if I can use that to pull the elastic out. So I've undone the stitching of just a small distance here. It's about 1 inch where I've been working. And in doing that, I have discovered possibly the worst thing I could have done. Because the way this has been constructed is I've got this layer which is a little bit of jersey fabric which is stitched at the top, and then there's no seam allowance to this. This has just been cut and then serged and cut to create that edge that doesn't fray. But what it does mean is that my elastic is actually sewn in all the way along on this edge here, and probably at the top as well, I think. Oh no, maybe not at the top. But so it sits all the way around. So to actually take out the old elastic, I would need to undo all of this stitching. And in doing that, probably this piece of fabric that's been used for the casing would actually just fray away because of the way it's been stitched. So I would need to replace this as well. Now, these are nice warm winter pyjama trousers and there's still lots of wear in them, but it's probably not worth the effort and the amount of time that would take. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to do the same unstitching along here, removing those stitches. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to thread my elastic into the channel that would create and all the way around and through the other side. So what I'm effectively doing is putting in a second layer of elastic. It does mean that it will be a little bit bulky, but I think that will probably be okay, and I think that's probably the quickest and easiest way to mend these. So I'm just going to undo this bit of stitching here as well. Okay, so now I've got a gap both sides of this front seam. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my elastic all the way through the waistband and out to the other end, and I will just secure it on both sides as close to this seam as I possibly can, and then we'll repair this hole. So the next thing we need to do is to cut our elastic to size. So to do this, you first of all want to take note of where this garment sits on the body when you're wearing it, or where your elastic band sits on your body. So for me, these are sitting slightly above the hip, but not as high up as the waist. And so I've taken that measurement, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my elastic just ever so slightly shorter than that measurement. You can do this just sort of by holding the elastic on you, perhaps while you're wearing the garment. So now we are going to thread up the elastic. So to do this, I find the easiest way is to take a safety pin, and this is a nice big chunky safety pin. I think it's actually a nappy pin, maybe they're called. And you're just going to attach that onto the edge of one end of the elastic. Don't put it too close to the edge because you don't want it to rip through, because we are going to be putting a little bit of pressure on this as we thread the elastic. I am now going to push this into one of the openings I've made, and so here I've got my channel. I've got quite a few loose threads there which I will deal with afterwards. And by attaching it to the pin, I can now guide the pin through this channel. And as you do that, you're going to want to make sure that the elastic stays nice and flat. You don't want it to get caught up or twisted because that will be uncomfortable when you wear it. And we are just going to pull this all the way through. So I've got the elastic all the way around, that's nice and even. You can see I've got a little bit of gathering going on, which is what we want to see because it wasn't very gathered before, and that's why they weren't holding themselves up. And so I've just got these two end pieces. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tuck these right in as close to that front waistband, centre front seam as I can. And I'm just going to put a pin in there. And then I'm going to take my guiding safety pin out of the elastic at this point. And then I'm just going to do the same thing here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use my machine and I am going to secure that elastic in place by that centre front seam. Now this won't be quite as neat as the original construction because I'm going by the seam and not on the seam. If this was a more important garment or perhaps something I was going to wear during the day, then I would have undone all of that seam and redone it all completely as it was. But this just needs a bit of a quick fix and it doesn't need to be absolutely perfect. I'm going to use a fairly small stitch for this. I think I'm going to set my machine to 2.6 millimeters and I'm just going to sew in a straight line across the waistband. So I've done an initial line of stitching on both sides to secure both ends of the elastic. I'm going to trim those threads because I don't want to get in a mess with all of these extra threads. And then I'm just going to reinforce that and do that same row of stitching just a couple of times to make sure that that elastic isn't going to slip out anywhere. So that's the main elastic back in, and so the only thing left to do is to repair the casing where we took this off to actually get to that channel in the first place. If you have found that you've got a seam allowance when you've undone this bit of sewing, then you can just sew that back in place. Today, just because this was a raw edge when I got that apart, I'm going to try and run a little bit of a zigzag stitch just along this edge, so not so it won't show on the front. I'm not sure how successful that's going to be because these are quite small gaps at this stage, but just to try and prevent any fraying in the future, and then we will just sew that down so that we don't have those gaps anymore. So I'm just going to put a zigzag stitch on my machine now. I'm going to make this quite a small zigzag as well because I've not got much space, and wish me luck because this isn't going to be easy. And so I have managed that a little bit. It's not perfect, but I'm happy with that because it's going to stop it from fraying. So again, I'm just going to trim these loose edges and then we're going to do our final couple of rows of stitching just to close off that gap that we opened. The most important thing here is actually to make sure that I'm catching the stitches at the edge of the bit that we've undone, just to make sure that that doesn't then slip and come undone further along the waistband. So I'll be catching the edge of these lines of stitching that were here originally and sewing up to the gap that I originally opened. And that's it. That is my final rows of stitching along here, which you can't see on the back because it blends in with the original stitching. Just to show you the front, there are some teeny tiny signs of the stitching here, thankfully mainly hidden by the bow that's on the front. This fabric's fairly forgiving because it's got quite a deep pile, but that was just the best I could do given the type of repair that we were working with here. And hopefully you can see there is now quite a bit more stretch in that waistband, and so hopefully they won't be slipping down when I wear these now.